everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the newly delivered The Whistling Skull. This is something I backed on Zoop. This is by B. Clay Moore, Tony Harris, and the colorist is Dave McCaig. I backed this because I'm a huge fan of Tony Harris. Historically, I've really enjoyed his art growing up. I think there was actually a time in when I was trying to be a professional comic artist in my early 20s, like when that was still like my goal as a kid, where Tony Harris was one of the people I was really kind of gearing my style towards. His approach, a lot of how he used line and design and thicker hatching and stuff was really influential to me for quite a while. There's a book I'm gonna Ubergeist, maybe is what it was called. There was a book that came out that really influenced me, that was like about a old Nazi scientist come back or something like that. I forget, but the art in that really blew my mind. Also, really enjoyed Ex Machina, which I luckily just found a big omnibus of, and then retroactively going back, getting Starman and all of that. So someone who I really enjoyed for a long time, and I just haven't seen anything by him in a while. And this is a project that I guess was coming out. I feel like I've seen some of this, and from what's said in the book, it was coming out through Wildstorm, or one of the Wildstorm subsidiaries, around the time Wildstorm got caught up with DC, and I guess the series never got finished. So maybe I had read some of it, but cool to go back to. It's definitely like, I think my tastes have evolved quite a bit in 20 years since. So like I look at this now and I'm not like, it doesn't get me so excited to go draw in this style as it once did. But it's like re-exploring what I used to love about it. A lot of it has to do with his expressions that he draws and things like that. Just really fun designs. So really enjoyed this book. Really cool to dig back into an artist that I once like spent a lot of time thinking about and mimicking some of what he does. So wanted to share this. The story is, again, as I get older, like it's a pretty just straightforward adventure story. It's very Mike Mignola, monsters. This guy here, Knuckles, really to me looks like a Lobster Johnson knockoff type of character. It's 1940s, fighting Nazis, monsters, and all that kind of stuff. You can see even in the color palette, it feels kind of like a Mignola book. So really beautiful art all throughout. But story-wise, it's just an adventure story. There's not much else to say about it other than that in terms of like how good it is or not. It's a well-told adventure story. So just give a brief overview of it. This is William here as a kid. He's going to grow up to be this character here, the Whispering Skull, and this is his buddy Nigel. Nigel is going to grow up to be the Lobster Johnson looking guy. I had to get a pretty big laugh out of this giant robot with big titties and nipples. So here you have Knuckles and the Skull grown up there in Switzerland, and they've been called in to help this town find their missing relatives. And there's like a Nazi scientist that's on the loose, grabbing people and turning them into monsters. You can see that kind of Lobster Johnson-esque costume there. As you get introduced to the town, you get introduced to a lot of other, fun, interesting characters. So we have an invisible man here, Johannes. He's kind of the one who's brought them in and is giving them the information they need to go searching. This page here is gives some of what I really always loved about Tony Harris is he can veer into almost look like he's photo referencing everything. And there's another image in here where I'll show that. And that was the stuff that very much influenced me. But I was always envious of the fact that he could also move into that more cartoony type of style where he can do exaggeration, almost like these Kevin Maguire type of expressions where you get these really exaggerated, melodramatic expressions that work really well in comics for telling stories. That combination of like what I consider to be like J.H. Williams, like core style, the way he renders a lot of the fabric and stuff with very sharp lines, but with that Kevin Maguire rubberiness and expressiveness, and then some of the fancy page designs, the Art Nouveau page designs, those were all elements that really appealed to me. In this scene, we're introduced to, this is the Nazi scientist who has run away, and he has a whole like circus full of circus freaks, but these are people from the town that he has stolen and modified them to give them superpowers. So we get these wild, kind of monstrous Nazi experiment designs here. And again, just kind of these fun layouts from Tony Harris. You also get some backstory. I'm not going to give away everything because this just came out, and I don't know if this was Zoop exclusive or if this will be coming out in any other format. It's also a pretty big book. You can see, like, this is a standard comic book size, so that's a pretty large book. It's pretty close to what the active area, the original artboard, would be, I think. So you're getting a backstory here that the Whispering Skull, or I get that wrong. The Whistling Skull, sorry. The Whistling Skull is a hero who's generational, so that the powers get passed on from person to person. And this character here with the brain showing through Dr. Skull is like getting the next generation ready in this scene. So it definitely sets up for further volumes to be released, which is really cool. It's cool to see a creator coming back to something that they wanted to keep going with and weren't able to. And hopefully with like the Zoop and the crowdfunding as a resource, creators like this who haven't been doing things, or at least I haven't been aware of what they're doing, can kind of come back into the spotlight and finish projects that they wanted to do earlier on. Just Nazi lab scenes, all the experimentation going on. Just fun stuff. A good group shot of all of the Nazi villains here. You can see them in all of their evil splendor. And you can kind of see this Mignola-esque use of light and dark. And even the colors feel pretty Mignola-esque to me. I've always really liked Dave McCaig as a colorist. I've always really liked colors that have really sharp cuts like that, and I think he's one of the best colorists using that style, especially like here where you just have like a cool mid-tone and then a light warm tone, and then you have the overlap of those two creating the shadows. That's always a technique I really like in Photoshop, and yeah, Dave McCaig's really good at that. So a really good fit, I think, for Tony Harris's work. These are the kind of illustrations that Tony Harris does that really influenced me, like when I was 21 years old. I really like that mix of the very obvious stylization, the thicker cross-hatching and stuff, but a fairly photorealistic approach to things. I think that probably set me down the road to photorealism, where I just started getting finer and finer and more realistic. And looking back on it, I think this more stylized stuff still probably is more impactful, and there's a reason I liked it so much. But then again, combined with McCaig's coloring, I really like that combination. And I think it lets the line work sing. It never, these people who go too dark, they have too many gradients, they'll run a gradient all the way up to black. They can really kill an artist's line work. And I think a colorist like Dave McCaig that uses flatter colors really respects the line art, and I've always appreciated that. So yeah, an image like this really brings back nostalgia for me. It kind of lights up the old part of my brain that really used to want to draw like that. And I think that's what I enjoyed most about this book, is just revisiting that. It's another big cool illustration here showing some of the art in the book. You can also see Tony Harris starting to play a little bit more. I'm not sure if like this art was done, in the early 2000s, and then this was all done more recently. There definitely feels to be a little bit different in style, a little bit of difference in style here and there. I don't know if he's just playing or if this is just a change in style over time, but there's more like splattery inks and stuff. There's also more of like a Sergio Topi-esque, like random, instead of filling in a black, just filling in some of the shadows with like these random moving lines. Another place that I see some Topi throughout the book is in the way he draws trees. I don't know that I have any pages here with that, but there's some really cool use of trees for shape and negative space throughout the book that I enjoyed quite a bit as well. In the back, you get the cover gallery for what would have been the release as it came out as a 6-issue miniseries. I don't know if it ever came out totally as a 6-issue miniseries, if this was coming out at the time, like when I got married and divorced while I was in undergrad, and basically, had to quit buying comics and wasn't able to buy comics for a long time. So maybe this stuff was just coming out and then never got collected. I'm not sure, but we've got covers, or at least what would have been the covers. And then you also get a sketchbook here which is actually one of the most interesting parts of the book to me, is showing that what Tony Harris does is he works up like really detailed at size ink and wash drawings, or ink and maybe he's working, it looks maybe like he's working with gray markers actually, basically like a fully rendered version of the artwork ahead of time, and then he's either tracing over it, or I don't know how he's doing it, they don't say, printing it out in blue line or something, but he's using these as kind of like the pencils, which is really interesting to me because I've been kind of doing this with Bound as well. I did a lot of this on Strange Death. This is something I've been doing a lot. Is pretty much doing my pencils are done in ink, so I can actually see the full contrast of the image. They're not as tight. They're a little bit sloppier. I'm not as careful about the quality of the lines and stuff, but I'm getting a sense for where everything is on the page in pretty good detail and all of the values. And I think it's really, really interesting to see that Tony Harris is doing this. I mean, they have the whole first issue in here done this way. I'll skip over a lot of that and just go to the last page because I think it's a particularly nice one. Again, that face that I really like there. I think it's really interesting that he's going in and working the grays because this is something he can give to the colorist. It also, there's not as much of his cross-hatching in these, and I think it's really allowing him to understand what he wants from the lighting structure of the page. So when he is doing his pure black and white with the cross-hatching, this is like information that he can lean back on. It seems like a lot of extra work to me, and I mean, these are pretty publishable on their own actually. I mean, they're not as tight, but some of the looser rendering, and I should probably, here's some of those trees I'm talking about, these beautiful trees that he draws. There's probably some advice I should take for myself as well. The originals might be better and looser, but just really, really interesting to see that. And there's some extras where there's like a poem in here. You see some of his sketches, and you get to see in his sketches where he goes really, really photorealistic, where to me, it looks like he's obviously got models on these, but it almost looks like an Alex Ross drawing. I mean, even the angles of the heads, the stylization of using the pencils and everything, you get a sense of the diversity of an artist. And just some of these, like these marks that he's making on here, are very, very interesting, patterned marks that he's making as well. So, and then you get like this more photorealistic, but in the style that you get in the Ex Machina. And seeing an artist that can kind of go between this and then the more cartoony stuff, that was one of those things that was really, really super inspiring to me when I was younger. So really cool trip into nostalgia. Really still liked it. I mean, story wise, as someone who's in their 40s, like a monster adventure like this isn't the first thing that I'm gonna run out and grab. But for an artist that I have a real fondness for and a real nostalgic memory for, I was very, very happy to dip in this book and really enjoyed it. And if you're into this kind of stuff, I would highly recommend it. I know this isn't kind of the normal fare for this channel, but I do think this is a really fun book. And for people who are into the genre stuff like this, or remember Tony Harris fondly like I do and haven't seen his stuff in a while, I would definitely try and seek this out. It was crowdfunded through Zoop. I don't know if they still have them available, but definitely check around. It's a pretty cool book. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up.